I recently discovered that the Washburn N4 that I owned from 1991 to 2005 is in fact the exact guitar now owned by Nuno Bettencourt, which he labels the 4N. This is the guitar that I found out Washburn is introducing a limited reproduction of. After the initial shock of seeing tons of photos and video of Nuno playing my old guitar and doing a much better job of it than I ever could, I started to research the release of this new model and found the few details shared by Washburn about what made the 4N different than an N4. This is what Washburn is saying. Nuno purchased the guitar from a fan. The neck has a unique profile. The pitch angle of the neck is different. It uses a collar nut. Collar? I don't really know how to say that. I'm going to say collar. And the body contours and depth of the cuts are a bit different. I'm going to tell you everything I know about my old N4, share close-up photos, shed some light in the origins of the guitar, its first 14 years, and some of the reasons why it is different from other N4s. I'm sure not even Washburn or Nuno know the precise history of this guitar. For those new to it all, the Washburn N4 is Nuno Bettencourt's signature model introduced in 1991. It's become one of the most unique and identifiable guitars branded by an artist. As any fan of the guitar already knows, one of its most significant features is the Stevens extended cutaway neck joint, designed by guitar builder Stephen Davies. Many fans of the guitar also know that Stephen Davies built or assembled the first guitars produced. These have become known as Davies N4s and have become quite collectible. So as an aspiring 20-year-old guitarist in 1991, I wasn't looking for a new guitar the day I walked into Rainbow Sound and Drum in Fresno, California. I was a fan of Nuno's, having been turned on to their release of Porno Graffiti through MTV and radio airplay. I knew from the guitar magazines at the time that Washburn was slated to release Nuno's signature model, but honestly, I had no real interest in owning one. I don't mind owning signature gear per se, but I felt that the N4 was so strongly branded to Nuno and recognizable that if I played something like that, I wouldn't be able to shake that recognition. Kind of like playing a guitar made to look like Van Halen's striped Frankenstrat or Steve Vai's Dayglow Ibanez Gem. So going back to the day I walked into Rainbow Sound and Drum, this was a tiny local music store, the kind that ran third or fourth behind the bigger stores in the area, but also had different selections of new and used gear than you typically find in those larger stores. While all the big stores carried Fender, Gibson, Ibanez, Rainbow Sound and Drum had none of those unless it was used. They carried PRS, BC Rich, Washburn, ESP, and a bunch of other more obscure stuff I can't even remember. They never had a very big selection either, less than 30 instruments on the wall, as well as I can remember it. One other thing that made the selection at Rainbow Sound and Drum interesting is that the owner would go to NAMM each year and make purchases right from the floor once the show was over, and they would go right up on the wall. In my years going to the store and knowing the owner, who I even played in a band with, he tended to buy things that were custom made or one-offs. So I walk in. I remember we were chatting a bit, and my eyes hit on the N4. I knew what it was instantly because it was being heavily marketed due to Extreme's popularity. I almost didn't even play it. I really didn't see myself owning an N4. I didn't even really mention that I had seen it to the owner while we were talking, but as the conversation went on, and I stayed there for a bit, I talked myself into at least taking it off the wall just so I could say that I had played one. I remember this vividly. I strummed an open G, and acoustically, it was like nothing I had heard before. It was so resonant, and the notes of the chords were so perfectly balanced with one another. I played some more open chords, just amazed by how the thing sounded acoustically. I tested out the action and intonation up and down the neck, and I can honestly say that it was the first flawless guitar neck I had ever played. I was just a kid, and the guitars I had been playing were in a lower cost range. Also, it was really comfortable to hold, and the trim was set up very well with that substantial and sturdy feeling collar Floyd Rose. So it took me a whole of 10 minutes to talk myself into buying it. I never even plugged it in and played it through an amp in the store. One of the fastest guitar buying decisions I've ever made in my life. That's how sure I was that this was a fantastic guitar, just sitting there playing it acoustically. Now, the problem was it was $1,200. That amount of money in 1991 for me as a 20-year-old kid was asking a lot. The owner offered it to me for $900 and was okay with looking at any trade-ins I might have. I ended up giving him a purple Ibanez RG550, an Ibanez RG770 with a flame maple top, a Fender jazz bass made in Mexico, and a Roland R5 rhythm composer. All of which I remember seeing sell very quickly, except for the Roland R5. So he made his money back and then some. I also might have paid him something like $200. I can't remember exactly the cash that I paid for it. I just really remember the gear that I traded in. Now I was committed to using the N4, having just traded in my main guitar for it. I had no regrets. When I was able to play it through my own amp, I was still as thrilled with the sound as I was when I was playing it acoustically. For the next 5 or 6 years, I used it as my main guitar, along with a modified Fender Strat as a backup. Anytime I picked up someone else's N4 or one in a store, it just didn't do it for me. And as a consequence, I never did find a backup for that guitar. Of course, I didn't know anything about the distinctions between different builders of the N4 or what it meant to have a Davies N4 at all. I eventually sold the guitar in 2005 on eBay. I was going through a time where I was much more into playing alternate tunings, so my Floyd Rose-equipped guitars weren't getting much love. eBay was also relatively new, and I was beginning to lighten the load in a big way. That old saying, the things you own end up owning you, was going through my mind a lot, and it was allowing me to part with even the things I cherished if they weren't being used. Here's a screen grab of the eBay listing that I saved after it sold, because I was in shock that I got $2,130 for it from a starting price of $99. This is also when I discovered what a Davies N4 even was. By the way, I had met Nuno at an in-store event in 1993, and I had him sign the back of the headstock. He actually turned the guitar over a couple times and said something like, "I thought I had all these." I always remember that, but I was a bit too starstruck at the time to fire back a question. I always wished I had asked him what he meant by that. Later, I kind of assumed that he was commenting on it being a one-piece body, which was pretty rare. I also slipped him a demo tape I had made with my band, which I dug up just for this video, and any music clips you hear are actually from that tape. Don't judge too harshly. It was recorded in 1992. Coincidentally, it was also recorded entirely using the 4N. It's kind of funny looking at these strange coincidences. Washburn releases a Nuno signature guitar. I buy one. I record a demo with it. I get Nuno to sign the guitar, and I give him that demo. I sell the guitar, and eventually Nuno buys it from another person. He then puts it front and center and labels it 4N. Washburn guitar builders get the 4N, note the differences, end up releasing a new signature model based on it, and now I almost want to buy the new 4N just so I can close this loop. I'd also be really curious how a copy of that guitar would feel to me today. I have to admit, I never regretted selling it. If I hadn't, there wouldn't be a story of it today. But every now and then, I get a little like Bilbo Baggins in the Fellowship of the Rings, and I say to myself, I should very much like to hold it again one last time. Now, what about those differences, I hear you asking? For starters, I believe the owner of Rainbow Sound and Drum bought this guitar directly from a trade show floor, possibly NAMM. I can't speak to how the guitar was built, but I do know that sometimes guitars that make their way to a trade show floor can have differences and also some unique attention paid to them. Here are the differences that I can spot just visibly. The fingerboard entirely covers up the truss rod slot. This used to bug the living crap out of me. I saw in a close-up picture that Nuno may have modified the pickup ring to give better access. I can't confirm that. I always had to either unscrew the neck pickup completely out of the body, or I had to completely remove the neck. That's right. I removed this neck a lot. I know I can almost hear people gasping about that. I had the neck off that guitar so many times that it had just become commonplace. Despite the information I'm reading from Washburn about the replicas having an original Floyd Rose, I can confirm that this guitar had a collar-licensed Floyd Rose when I got it new. I can't get a high enough resolution photo of it now to see if it still has the collar, but they may have changed it out. That is why it has a collar nut. The collar system may have contributed to the different neck pitch as well. By the way, just like the neck, I had taken the collar off of that guitar as well, and the pickups and everything really. This was a working guitar, and it needed to be maintained and cleaned by me. Which brings me to the wear and tear. You can see that Nuno has put much more wear and tear on it in the few years he's owned it than I ever did in 14 years. Originally, having such an expensive guitar, I was put off by how dirty it was getting. The neck seemed completely raw to me, and the body just had a thin seal of what may have been tung oil. Within the first 6 months of owning the guitar, I know I had taken it all apart and sanded the top of the body lightly, but sanded it more heavily just where the dirt was already building up. And then I sealed it again, only on the top with a coat of tung oil. This is why, if you ever can inspect the guitar, you'll notice the top has just a slight different color than the back and from other N4s. In truth, I didn't do a great job with this. I left sanding marks on the top that you can probably still see today. Frankly, because the guitar was so unfinished to begin with, I did a lot of stuff to it I wouldn't normally do to any other guitar, which leads me to the neck. Much has been said about how different the neck is. Washburn has said that special measuring tools were developed to get the copies just right. Now, there may have been differences in this guitar originally, I don't know, but I also sanded the hell out of that neck. The neck was just completely raw when I got it. It started getting green and gross. When I sanded it the first time, I had to take a bunch of dirt off. I can still remember the sand dust everywhere and thinking, I am destroying my guitar. At least I had a good idea, though, of how to sand to a shape from woodworking classes in high school. I had also applied tung oil to it the first time, but that didn't make much difference after I put more wear on it, so I never did that again. After that initial sanding, I could tell that I had changed it slightly, especially in the cowboy chord positions, but it wasn't bad. I still liked it. They're building replicas of this guitar now, so that speaks pretty loudly for my contribution to the neck profile. I did not, and I never have, pampered a guitar. From then on, though, I would sand it probably once or twice a year, but only with a very fine wet dry, just enough to get it smooth. I stopped caring about the dirt so much. I never did anything again to the body after I had restained it that first time. At one point, I know the volume pot failed, and I think the three-way switch did as well. I took the volume pot out and I replaced it with one of the same value that was using an audio taper. One funny thing about this, though, is that when I got the new pot installed, the shaft was the wrong size. The original knob wouldn't fit on it. So I did what any other kid would do with a garage full of dad's tools. I filed the shaft down until the knob could fit over it again. The original knob is the kind with that side screw, so I didn't have to get it perfect. Once I could get the knob to slip over the shaft, and I tightened the screw, it was good to go. Because my filing job wasn't perfect, I remember the knob had a bit of an angle to it when it turned, but I didn't care. I doubt the same pot is still on that guitar today, but maybe it is, and maybe some master craftsman has looked at it and just gone, what the hell? you can't blame it on Stephen Davies. It was all me. Not much more to say, really. The case that I got with it was not a Washburn branded case. It was a generic black Tolex wood shell case with no branding of any kind, and it was put together rather poorly. Some of the staples had missed the wood for the strap compartment. I always felt a little cheated by that when I saw all the other N4s coming with these molded Washburn cases, or later the flight cases they provided. To close out the video, I feel like mentioning that I would totally rock the N4 again today. I've come around in a circle where I've been looking at buying guitars with Floyd Roses again. It's one of the reasons I found out that there was a 4N being made. Who knows? Maybe I'll end up with a 4N. And if I do, you can bet I'll be making a video of that and comparing it to my memory of the N4 that Nuno now has.